Oh, we're in single digits now. Did you realize that? Because there are just 9 days left until this election hits us. And more than 40 million Americans have already cast their ballots. There are also two growing storylines that we need to tackle at the top of this hour. According to the Wall Street Journal, Republicans are facing increased concerns that the party's ground game has stalled in critical battleground states. You don't say. I guess if you don't have one, that's what happens. Meanwhile, some Democratic strategists like Simon Rosenberg of the Hopium Chronicles are beginning to make the case that polls from right-leaning organizations are flooding the zone, leading to an inflated sense that Trump and Republicans could dominate on Election Day. Joining us now is NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard and CEO of the Tara Group, Tom Bonnier. Welcome, both.
So let's start with this ground game. Vaughn, you covered the Trump campaign. You've covered them extensively. You've traveled with the former president. What is going on with the ground game situation?
Let's just start off, Simone, with the very fact that Donald Trump has publicly said over the course of months that he wanted the RNCs, the share of their money, to go towards fighting what he says is voter fraud and election integrity units, as opposed to get out the vote efforts, which is the ground game. Donald Trump in August at a campaign rally in North Carolina, he literally told the crowd that they already have enough votes. They just need to make sure that there's not cheating so that they don't lose. And we have seen that play out at the ground game level across the country. It's usually the RNC and the campaign that teams up with the state GOP to build those ground game operations. But instead, here in the recent weeks, we have seen them effectively outsource that operation to the Elon Musk PAC, America PAC, which is sort of haphazardly trying last minute to put something together, along with the likes of Turning Point USA, which is that Charlie Kirk organization. But neither of those two organizations, neither of them have any wins to their name on record here. And so that is a lot of pressure to put on these organizations to do Donald Trump's campaign ground game efforts here. And I think that is where I was in the rural Arizona County of Mojave County just last week, kind of like MAGA capital of the West, if you will. And it was grassroots volunteers for Trump that were the real driving forces there. And so come a week from Tuesday, if Donald Trump is in this race or even wins it, a lot of that is going to have to do with grassroots volunteers and enthusiasm among MAGA faithful.
Tom, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Lisa. No, I was just going to say, I can just tell you, as a chairman of a political party, you can't outsource your ground game to folks who don't know jack about the ground or the game. So you are where you are at this point. Alicia, I'll give it back to you. I just wanted to make that.
I look forward to learning what the difference is between the ground and the game, Chairman Steele, but we can save that for later in the show. Tom, tell me, at this point, 9 days out, what can polls tell you? What is it that polls cannot tell you?
Well, what polls can tell us at this moment is that it's a close election, or at least that's the most likely outcome. We do see that they're bouncing around a little bit. Everybody is still riding the roller coaster for some reason. One poll will come out that shows it close. The New York Times poll a few days ago, Democrats are in doom and despair. This morning, there's a +4 survey from ABC for Vice President Harris, and everyone's excited. The reality is the pollsters don't know. They're building these likely voter models where they're guessing who is going to vote. The reality is we have hard data now. You're talking about the early voting data. That's the data that we should really be focusing on, is who's actually voting. That's going to tell us a lot more. So my advice to people is probably pay very little, if any, attention to the polls over the closing days. Well,
I want to stick with that because I think we need to get on the table and put it right there, that there's a lot of crazy BS going on right now with flooding the zone with bad polling. And they're Republican firms, MAGA firms explicitly, oriented towards that effort. You have, on Pod Save America, co-host Dan Pfeiffer noting this: the fundamental danger of all these Republican polls that are flooding the zone that Simon Rosenberg has written about so often is that they create an impression among Republicans and the Republican base that Trump is going to win. That's part of the setup narrative. That's the setup narrative, because they'll put these polls back up in your face on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday morning and go, well, Donald Trump was leading by 6. How did we lose? And so the reality of it is, I agree with you, Tom. You can't really take these polls to heart, because the zone has been flooded with a lot of bad information to bring the averages down for Kamala, because we're basically looking at Trump's ceiling. And so how then do we process the rest of the campaign setting these polls aside?
And what does the early voter data tell us?
Right,
Because
exactly.
the chairman is right. This is the same thing that happened in 2022 with the red wave and all the polling.
Right.
He's exactly right about what's going on.
Well, and we have to remember in 2022, the average poll missed by 5 points. Which is a big miss. It's why the polls told us that there was going to be a red wave, and it didn't happen because of these red wave polls.
Right.
And the news is, as you said, Simon Rosenberg has shown us that it's actually a bigger op this time around. There are many more of these red wave pollsters out there doing what they do. So what the early vote is actually telling us is that turnout actually looks pretty good for Democrats, which is somewhat surprising. We didn't expect. We knew that in 2020 there was huge early voting turnout. Democrats were more COVID conscious. Republicans were told by Donald Trump that voting early was fraud. So Democrats dominated it. We expected to see that shift. We know Republicans have been pushing the early vote so far. We're seeing a small shift. We're not seeing the sort of shift that Republicans were counting on. In states like Michigan and Wisconsin, Democrats are actually leading in the early vote at this moment. And states like Georgia and North Carolina, where Republicans started off hot, it's actually coming back together, and it looks more like it did in 2020, which is certainly a good sign for Democrats.
I would also say on that point, Alicia, and maybe Vaughn, you can address this part of it as well. The interesting aspect of this turnout modeling is you have to take into account that during the primary, Trump lost about 20 to 22% of his base that went for Nikki Haley. We lovingly called them the Nikki Haley voter. They are still in that camp. Those folks don't fall back in line. What are you seeing, and what is your reporting telling you about how within the various cohorts that are coming together, that are going to the polls now, sort of a read on the exit polling, if you will, the early read on the exit polling in terms of how people are actually landing as Republicans, specifically, where you're seeing a big bump, as we saw in Georgia, where they were like 49% of the early vote, or 50-some% of the early vote was Republicans, and 30-some% were Democrats. I said, well, let's be careful about that number, because that's not all MAGA in that Republican vote.
That's absolutely accurate. And let's just, if we could, let's take Arizona as an anecdote to this. Arizona has a long history dating back to the early 90s of mail-in voting and early voting. And we saw in 2020 Donald Trump tell Republican voters, don't do that, go in person or drop off your mail ballot on Election Day. And at the close of election night, when most people were going to bed, Joe Biden had an 8 percentage point lead. But as they started to count those late mail ballots that Republicans were turning last minute, that 8-point lead turned into just 11,000 votes. But if you go, and this is where I think potentially the data that we're seeing so far in this 2024 election is actually maybe more reflective of the 2018 election in Arizona, where at that point in time, it was Republicans who historically were the ones that would mail in vote and early vote. And on election night, Martha McSally and Kyrsten Sinema, they were running in the Arizona Senate race. They were effectively tied when everybody went to bed. But it was Democrats who were coming in late to vote and were turning in their mail ballots late and handing them in person at the voting location. And Kyrsten Sinema ended up beating Republican Martha McSally by 2.5 percentage points. And so for Republicans, they want to see these big numbers coming in right now, because that's how it used to be in some places around the country. If they were not getting these numbers, that's what would be so highly concerning for them. But to your other question, I think when we're looking at here that turnout operation here, really my question that is outstanding, which again, when we're talking about turnout models, just how many of those MAGA faithful are going to actually become MAGA voters? Because Donald Trump turned out a record number in 2020 around the country. But are there even more of those people that he's able to turn out here over the course of the next week?
Yeah.
Tom Bonnier, I am curious. When Vaughn came on, I said, what do you want to talk about 9 days out? And he wants to talk about Tuesday night, sort of, we get to election night, what it tells us about where we are as an electorate, where we are as a country. When we sort of zoom out beyond this, who's going to win, what will it tell us next Tuesday?
Yeah, well, if I can just put in one plug here, because you mentioned election night, I just want to take a slight digression to a reminder. We talked about 4 years ago the Red Mirage, and where what we said is, look, the vote's going to look Republican at first, and then it's going to come in more Democratic. And the reality is, even though more Republicans are voting early, especially in states like Pennsylvania, where the mail balloting is still overwhelmingly, it's still 2-to-1 Democratic, those early votes we see on election night are going to look much more Republican. Donald Trump will say, again, stop the count. And so when you ask, what will it tell us on election night? We have to be very careful in those first few hours, because in a lot of these states, it will look like Donald Trump is winning. Then those mail ballots in states where, look, they asked for the right to be able to count those ballots before Election Day and just have them ready to go. They weren't given the right to do that in many of these states. It could take days to be able to answer your question. But in the end, look, if the polling data is correct,
weeks. Let's manage expectations here.
Right, it could be. Well, California, we know California can take a few weeks to get these votes. So it'll be a while before we can answer that question. But we do still appear to be closely divided. But let's remember, since the Dobbs decision, one party has outperformed the polls consistently, and that's the Democratic Party.
Vaughn, I just, I'm clicking this pen like,
He's
what
clicking the pen. I was like, all right, Vaughn, settle in. It's coming. Here it comes.
Vaughn, we played the sound a little earlier of a preview of Senator J.D. Vance on Meet the Press today with our colleague Kristen Welker, where he is saying that he essentially agrees with the enemy within comments from Donald Trump, talking about Democrats, specifically like Pelosi and Adam Schiff. And it strikes me as this, why is this their closing argument is really what I'd like to know. And then this is not what we do in America. This is just, I can't remember, I'm 34 years old. I can't remember any other Republican presidential candidates making the case that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance have made about the fact that, like, America is trash, it's garbage, maybe I'll be nice after, in a couple months, I want to be a dictator on day one. Like, what is the argument here? Take me into the MAGA world.
I think the difference between the campaigns that you and Michael have run was most campaigns throughout the last decades of American history have been on unite to win campaign strategies. That's not Donald Trump's. It's divide to win, because he believes that there are enough of those MAGA faithful that are energized by the personal attacks, that is what gets them involved and gets them engaged. And at the same time, for J.D. Vance and anybody that is trying to run alongside Donald Trump, there is only one way to run, and it is to run that way. The issue for them is we had this conversation, all of us, right after the 2022 midterms, when the likes of Kari Lake lost, and Tudor Dixon in Michigan, and Herschel Walker in Georgia, and up in Wisconsin and Nevada, these Trump-backed candidates for Senate and governor, they all tried to run like Donald Trump on election denialism, on conspiracy theories, on personal attacks, on supporting the overturning of Roe v. Wade. And the voters came out, despite what even the polls were suggesting, came out and rejected that form of republicanism. Yet we knew Donald Trump, 2 weeks after those midterm losses, announced his 2024 presidential run. And at Mar-a-Lago, inside of that ballroom, he made clear exactly how he was going to run. He was going to run the exact way that those 2022 Republicans ran and lost. Fast forward, we are here at this moment of time. The question is, has he been able to convince a few more Americans that the conspiracy theories are real or worth dismissing to vote for him and put him back into the White House? Or are Americans again going to reject that form of politics that has long been rejected in the United States of America?